What does the booklet say? Our booklet tells our story, right from the beginning, when we were called Northants People First, all the way up to and end of the first 21 years. We asked our friend Jan Walmsley to help give us the bigger picture, to show why we were important and what other groups were doing. The important bits. Set up in 1990 by and for people with learning difficulties to get a better life.
So you've given some examples of what's in the report. Give us some other examples of some of the main things that have now come out now you've done the work.
Well, one of the things I think has come out is a sort of trajectory of self-advocacy, and I think Central England are like a bit of an example, I suppose, of how self-advocacy has travelled and developed over the past 21 years. It all started with a great bang in the early 90s, when once they'd begun, they really were motoring. They were advising the county council within 2 or 3 years, having battles with carers organisations, launching an internet site, which was quite something then, and linking with a lot of other people with learning difficulties in this country and overseas. So there was actually quite a sense of a social movement of people with learning difficulties which was going to change the way people with learning difficulties were perceived, change their contribution, for example, to policy making. So by 2001, people like members of Central England were advising the government on what should be in the white paper. And for me, that was probably the high tide of self-advocacy. I think it's retreated since then. I think its influence has decreased, and groups like Central England, which are run on certain principles, probably the main one is that people with learning difficulties are in control, that they actually run the organisation. They don't delegate that job, and the supporters are there to help them run the organisation. The supporters are not there to run the organisation. I think that sort of self-advocacy is now struggling, and there are all sorts of reasons for that. I mean, one is that local authorities, once upon a time, amazingly, gave them core funding, so that they could just exist, and then they could go off and get more money to do things. Now the only way they exist is by going off and getting money to do things. So that kind of work of bringing new people in, helping them build confidence and the skills to be effective self-advocates isn't happening in the same way, because they just don't have the resources to do it. And I think inclusion policies in education and the closure of day centres, and that kind of thing, the closure of segregated services, has ironically undermined self-advocacy, because people don't identify as a person with a learning disability. So they're not going to join because they don't think it's for them. And also I think the successful organisations are those that have kind of become more professional and effectively are managed by paid support workers, with the members taking an important role, but it isn't the same as the model that Central England People First and others like Liverpool and Scotland and London, the ones that were established in the late 80s, early 90s. That model, in my mind, and I might be wrong, is struggling.
And that model of self-advocates running and leading still exists in Central England People First?
It certainly does exist in Central England People First, and I think it's been one of the most interesting aspects of this project that the project has been led and run by people with learning difficulties, Angela, Ian, Craig, although it would be foolish to claim that without help from, huge amount of help from Catherine and the project worker and people like myself and Ian Buchanan and Ken from Web Enable and Northamptonshire Archives, it's been a lot of people have helped it happen, but they still have effectively been the leaders of the project, and I think in many ways that's worked really well.
People with learning difficulties did not have many choices or chances to have a life like other people. Some people were not allowed to drink. Some people were not allowed to drink, were told what to do by their families, and were not allowed to do what they wanted in day centres. Centrelink People First helped people meet each other, make friends, and do what they wanted to do. We got a lot of things changed locally, like the community care plan. Our local groups did things that were important to them, like the racism reporting and parenting groups. We did lots of things nationally, like the England People First meeting, Joseph Rowntree, Our Lives, Our Communities, and the National Forum.